The first morning in Mr. Wellington's house felt like waking up in a dream. Lucy opened her eyes to sunlight streaming through clean windows, something she hadn't experienced in over a month. For a moment, she forgot where she was and panicked, thinking she had overslept in some public place where she wasn't supposed to be. Then she remembered the events of the previous night and felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She could smell something wonderful coming from downstairs, the scent of bacon and coffee and fresh bread. Her stomach immediately responded with a loud growl, reminding her that she was still getting used to the idea of regular meals. She got dressed in the same clothes from yesterday, wishing she had something cleaner to wear. When Lucy came downstairs, she found Mr. Wellington in the kitchen, standing over the stove and cooking breakfast. He was wearing casual clothes instead of his expensive suit, and he looked more relaxed than he had the night before. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "I hope you slept well. I made pancakes and bacon, but if you don't like those things, I can make something else." Lucy stared at the feast he had prepared. There were fluffy pancakes stacked high on a plate, crispy bacon, fresh fruit, and orange juice in a real glass pitcher. It was more food than she and Grace usually saw in an entire week. "You made all this for me?" she asked in amazement. "Well, I made it for both of us," Mr. Wellington said. "But I have to admit, it's been a long time since I've had someone to cook breakfast for. I forgot how much I enjoyed it." As they ate together at the big dining room table, Mr. Wellington asked Lucy about her plans for the day. He suggested they visit Grace at the hospital and then maybe do some shopping for clothes and school supplies. "School supplies?" Lucy asked, confused. "But I'm not in school anymore. I haven't been since I got kicked out of my house." "That's going to change," Mr. Wellington said firmly. "Every child deserves an education, and you're obviously very smart. We'll get you enrolled in a good school as soon as possible." Lucy felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. She had always loved learning, and she missed her teachers and classmates more than she had admitted to herself. But then doubt crept in. What if the other kids ask questions about where I've been? She worried. What if they can tell I was homeless? Mr. Wellington set down his fork and looked at Lucy seriously. "Your past doesn't define who you are," he said. "Yes, you've been through some very hard times, but that just shows how strong and brave you are. Most kids your age would never have survived what you've been through." After breakfast, they went to visit Grace at the hospital. Lucy was relieved to see that her friend looked much better than she had the night before. Grace's color had returned, and she was sitting up in bed reading a magazine. "Lucy!" Grace exclaimed when she saw her young friend. "You look so different. You're clean and rested, and you're even smiling." Lucy rushed to give Grace a gentle hug, careful not to disturb the tubes and wires connected to her friend. "Mr. Wellington let me stay at his house last night," she explained. "He says I can stay there while you're getting better." Grace looked over at Mr. Wellington with careful eyes. She had lived on the streets long enough to be suspicious of anyone who offered help without asking for something in return. "That's very kind of you," she said cautiously. "But I hope you understand that Lucy is very special to me. I've been looking after her, and I want to make sure she's safe." Mr. Wellington nodded respectfully. "I understand your concern," he said. "Lucy told me how much you've helped her and how you kept her safe when she had nowhere else to go. I have the deepest respect for what you've done for her." Grace studied his face for a long moment, then seemed to relax. She had spent years reading people, and she could usually tell when someone was being genuine. "Lucy needs stability," Grace said. "She needs to be in school, and she needs adults who will believe in her and help her reach her potential." "I can't give her those things, but maybe you can. Over the next few weeks." Lucy's life began to transform in ways she had never imagined possible. Mr. Wellington enrolled her in the best private school in the city, where the classes were small and the teachers gave individual attention to every student. At first, Lucy was behind in some subjects because of the time she had missed, but she worked extra hard to catch up. The other students were curious about the new girl who had appeared in the middle of the school year. But Lucy followed Mr. Wellington's advice and focused on making friends rather than worrying about what people might think of her background. She discovered that most kids were just happy to have someone new to play with and talk to. Lucy's favorite subject was mathematics, something that surprised everyone, including herself. She had always been good with numbers, but she had never had the chance to really explore advanced math concepts before. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed Lucy's natural ability and started giving her extra challenging problems to work on. "You have a gift," Mrs. Rodriguez told Lucy one day after class. "With the right education and hard work, you could go to any college you want and study whatever interests you most." Lucy had never thought about college before. In her old life, she had just assumed she would finish high school and then find some kind of job to help support her family. The idea that she could choose her own future based on her interests and abilities was completely new to her. At home, Lucy and Mr. Wellington were learning how to be a family together. It wasn't always easy. Lucy still had nightmares sometimes about being thrown out of her house, and Mr. Wellington was still learning how to take care of a child after years of living alone. But they were both committed to making it work. Mr. Wellington hired a counselor to help Lucy work through the trauma of being abandoned by her family and living on the streets. Dr. Martinez was a kind woman who specialized in helping children who had experienced difficult situations. She taught Lucy techniques for dealing with anxiety and helped her understand that what had happened to her wasn't her fault. Sometimes adults make bad decisions that hurt children, Dr. Martinez explained during one of their sessions. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the children. You didn't deserve to be treated that way, and you don't have to carry guilt or shame about what happened to you. Lucy also started taking piano lessons, something she had always wanted to do but never had the opportunity to try. Her teacher, Mr. Chen, was patient and encouraging, and Lucy discovered that she had a natural ear for music. Playing the piano became a way for her to express feelings that were sometimes too complicated for words. The rain tapped against the window of the small apartment on Maple Street. Inside, 8-year-old Lucy sat at the kitchen table, carefully coloring a picture she had drawn of her family. She used a red crayon for her dad's work shirt and a yellow one for the sun shining above their little house. This was her way of making everything look happy, even when things at home felt heavy and sad. Lucy lived with her father and stepmother in this tiny 2-bedroom apartment. The walls were thin and she could hear every conversation, every argument, every whispered complaint about money. Her real mother had died 3 years ago from cancer, and Lucy still missed her every single day. She missed the way her mom would braid her hair before school and the way she would sing lullabies when Lucy couldn't sleep. Her father worked at the old factory downtown, the one with the tall smokestacks that you could see from their apartment window. He left early in the morning when it was still dark and came home late at night smelling like oil and metal. His hands were always rough and stained, but they were gentle when he tucked Lucy into bed and told her stories about better days coming soon. Her stepmother was different from her real mom in every way possible. Where her mother had been warm and patient, her stepmother was cold and quick to anger. She had married Lucy's father 18 months ago, but she never looked at Lucy the way a mother should look at her child. Instead, Lucy often caught her stepmother staring at her with annoyed eyes, like she was a problem that needed to be solved. The stepmother worked part-time at a beauty salon across town, doing nails for ladies who had enough money to spend on such things. She would come home complaining about her customers, about the smell of the chemicals, about how little money she made. But most of all, she complained about Lucy. "That kid eats too much," she would whisper to Lucy's father when she thought Lucy couldn't hear. "She needs new clothes every few months because she keeps growing. And those school supplies cost a fortune." Lucy tried to be invisible when her stepmother was around. She would do her homework quietly, help with simple chores without being asked, and never ask for anything she didn't absolutely need. But it never seemed to be enough. No matter how good she tried to be, her stepmother always found something wrong. On this particular Tuesday evening, Lucy's father was working another double shift. The factory had been giving him extra hours lately because they needed the money. Their rent had gone up, and the old car needed repairs they couldn't afford. Lucy knew this because she heard the worried conversations between her father and stepmother late at night when they thought she was sleeping. Lucy was in her small bedroom, reading one of the library books she had checked out that week. She loved getting lost in stories about brave kids who went on adventures and found treasure. In these stories, everything always worked out in the end. and the good people were rewarded for their kindness. Her stepmother was in the kitchen, counting the tips she had made that day. She always counted her money carefully, organizing the bills and coins into neat piles on the kitchen counter. Lucy had seen her do this routine many times before. First, she would empty her purse, then sort everything by amount, and finally write the total in a small notebook she kept hidden in a drawer. $23.50, her stepmother muttered to herself, writing the number down. Not even enough to cover groceries for the week. She left everything on the counter and went to take a shower, something she always did immediately after coming home from the salon. She said the chemical smells from work made her feel sick, so she had to wash them off right away. Lucy continued reading her book, completely unaware that anything was wrong. She was deep in a story about a young girl who had found a magical key that opened doors to different worlds. Lucy wished she had a key like that, one that would open a door to a place where her mother was still alive, and they were all happy together. About an hour later, her stepmother came out of the bathroom with wet hair and an angry expression on her face. She stormed into the kitchen and immediately started looking around the counter where she had left her money. "Where is it?" she said loudly, moving papers and looking under placemats. "I know I left it right here." Lucy heard the commotion and came out of her room to see what was happening. Her stepmother was frantically searching the kitchen counter, her face getting redder by the minute. "What's wrong?" Lucy asked innocently, genuinely wanting to help. "Don't act like you don't know," her stepmother snapped. "I had a dollar bill right here on this counter. I counted my tips and there was a $1 bill with the rest of my money. Now it's gone." Lucy looked at the counter and saw the pile of money that was still there, several $5 bills, some ones, and a handful of coins. She didn't understand why her stepmother was so upset about one missing dollar when there was still money on the counter. "Maybe it fell behind the counter," Lucy suggested helpfully. "Or maybe it got mixed up with the other papers?" "No," her stepmother said firmly. "I know exactly how much money I had, and I know exactly where I put it. Someone took it, and since you're the only other person in this house, it had to be you." Lucy's eyes went wide with shock. She had never taken anything that didn't belong to her. Her real mother had taught her that taking other people's things was wrong, and she had never forgotten that lesson. "I didn't take it," Lucy said quietly. "I was in my room reading the whole time. I didn't even come into the kitchen." "Don't lie to me," her stepmother said, her voice getting louder. "I know you took it. Kids your age always want money for candy and toys. You probably thought I wouldn't notice one little dollar missing." "But I really didn't take it," Lucy repeated, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I promise I didn't touch your money." Her stepmother crossed her arms and stared down at Lucy with cold, angry eyes. "Empty your pockets," she demanded. Lucy turned her pajama pockets inside out, showing that they were completely empty except for a small piece of lint. She then ran to her backpack and dumped everything out on the living room floor, her school books, pencils, erasers, and the library book she had been reading. "No money. Check my room," Lucy said desperately. "Check everywhere." "I really didn't take it." But her stepmother had already made up her mind. In her view, Lucy was the only possible suspect, and that was enough evidence for her. She had been looking for reasons to be angry with Lucy for months, and now she finally had one. "I'm so tired of this," her stepmother said, pacing around the small living room. "I work hard for every penny I earn, and I come home to find that my own stepdaughter is stealing from me. This is exactly the kind of behavior I was afraid of." Lucy didn't understand what her stepmother meant by this kind of behavior. She had never stolen anything before, never even thought about it. She was a good student, she followed the rules, and she always tried to stay out of trouble. "Please believe me," Lucy begged. "I would never take your money." "Maybe it blew away when you opened the window, or maybe it got stuck to another bill." "Stop making excuses," her stepmother shouted. "I know what I know, and I'm not going to let you turn into a little thief under my roof." The apartment fell silent, except for the sound of Lucy's quiet crying. She sat on the floor, surrounded by her scattered school supplies, feeling more alone than she had ever felt since her mother died. She missed her real mother so much in that moment. Her mother would have believed her. Her mother would have helped her look for the missing money instead of automatically assuming the worst. When Lucy's father finally came home from his double shift, he was exhausted and covered in grease stains. His shoulders were bent from the heavy work, and his eyes were tired. All he wanted was to eat a simple dinner and fall asleep in his chair like he did every night. The next few days at home felt like walking on broken glass. Lucy's stepmother watched her every move with suspicious eyes, as if she was waiting for Lucy to steal something else. Every time Lucy walked past the kitchen counter, her stepmother would quickly check to make sure nothing was missing. The atmosphere in their small apartment had become so tense that Lucy started spending most of her time in her bedroom, coming out only for meals and school. Lucy's father tried to act normal, but she could see the disappointment in his eyes whenever he looked at her. He had always been her hero, the one person who understood her and made her feel safe. Now even he believed she was a thief. The hurt in Lucy's chest felt like a heavy stone that made it hard to breathe. At school, Lucy couldn't concentrate on her lessons. Her teacher, Mrs. Johnson, noticed that the usually bright and attentive girl seemed distracted and sad. When Mrs. Johnson asked if everything was okay at home, Lucy just nodded and said she was fine. She was too ashamed to tell anyone that her own family thought she was a criminal. The situation at home got worse each day. Lucy's stepmother started making comments about how they couldn't trust her anymore. She would say things like, "I better count my money every night now," or, "I guess we can't leave anything valuable lying around." Each comment felt like a knife cutting deeper into Lucy's heart. On Friday evening, exactly 1 week after the missing dollar incident, Lucy's stepmother decided she had had enough. Lucy's father was working another late shift, and Lucy was doing her homework at the kitchen table when her stepmother came home from the salon in an especially bad mood. "I can't do this anymore," her stepmother announced, throwing her purse down on the counter. "I can't live in a house where I have to worry about a thief every single day." Lucy looked up from her math problems, confused by the sudden outburst. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly. "I mean you," her stepmother said, pointing an angry finger at Lucy. "I mean this whole situation. I work hard for my money, and I shouldn't have to come home and worry about whether my stepdaughter is going through my things." "But I told you I didn't take anything," Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never taken anything from you." "And I told you I don't believe you," her stepmother shot back. "Actions have consequences, young lady. If you want to act like a little criminal, then maybe you should see what it's like to live like one." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. There was something different about her stepmother's tone tonight, something that scared her more than the usual angry lectures. Her stepmother marched into Lucy's bedroom and started throwing clothes into Lucy's school backpack. She grabbed Lucy's few possessions, a stuffed rabbit that had belonged to her real mother, a photo of her parents from before her mom got sick, her favorite books, and some basic clothes. "What are you doing?" Lucy asked, following her stepmother and watching in horror as her belongings were carelessly shoved into the bag. "I'm solving our problem," her stepmother said without looking at Lucy. "If you think you can steal from this family, then you don't deserve to be part of this family." Lucy couldn't believe what was happening. "You can't just kick me out," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm only 8 years old. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem anymore," her stepmother replied coldly. "Maybe living on the streets will teach you some respect for other people's property." "What about Dad?" Lucy asked desperately. "He'll be home soon. You can't do this without talking to him first." Her stepmother smiled in a way that made Lucy's stomach turn. "Your father is working a double shift tonight. He won't be home until tomorrow morning. And by then, you'll be long gone." Lucy felt panic rising in her chest. This couldn't be happening. Her stepmother couldn't really be planning to throw her out into the cold night. But as she watched her stepmother zip up the backpack and thrust it toward her, Lucy realized that this nightmare was very real. "Please," Lucy begged, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything you want. I'll give you my allowance every week. I'll do all the chores. I'll stay in my room and never bother you. Just please don't make me leave." "You should have thought about that before you decided to become a thief," her stepmother said, grabbing Lucy by the arm and pulling her toward the front door. Lucy tried to resist, but she was small and her stepmother was determined. Within minutes, Lucy found herself standing in the hallway outside their apartment. clutching her backpack and staring at the closed door that had just been slammed in her face. She knocked on the door frantically, crying and begging to be let back in. "Please," she sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'll be better. I promise I'll be better." But there was no answer from inside. The apartment that had been her home for her entire life was now closed to her forever. Lucy stood in that hallway for what felt like hours, hoping her stepmother would change her mind or that her father would come home early. But as the night got later and the building got quieter, Lucy realized that no one was coming to save her. The first night on the streets was the worst night of Lucy's life. She wandered around her neighborhood in the dark, not knowing where to go or what to do. Every shadow seemed scary, every sound made her jump. She had never been outside alone at night before, and the world felt huge and dangerous. She tried going to a few places she knew: the school playground, the library, the small park where her father sometimes took her on Sundays. But everywhere was closed or felt unsafe. Finally, exhausted and shivering from the cold, she found a small space behind a dumpster near a 24-hour convenience store. The ground was dirty and hard, but at least she was somewhat hidden from view. Lucy curled up with her backpack as a pillow and tried to sleep, but every noise made her afraid. Cars driving by, people walking past, cats fighting in the alley. Everything seemed threatening when you were a small child alone in the dark. The next morning, Lucy woke up stiff and cold. Her clothes were dirty from sleeping on the ground, and she was hungrier than she had ever been in her life. She had never missed a meal before, and the empty feeling in her stomach was scary and painful. She spent that first day walking around the city, trying to figure out what to do. She thought about going to school, but she was too embarrassed about how she looked and smelled. She thought about going to the police, but she was afraid they would just send her back to her stepmother. By the second day, Lucy had made her way to the downtown area where there were more people and more places to find shelter. She discovered that the public library was warm and safe during the day, and the librarians didn't ask questions as long as she was quiet and well-behaved. It was at the library that Lucy met Grace, an elderly woman who seemed to live there during the day just like Lucy was starting to do. Grace had kind eyes and a gentle voice, and she was the first person to show Lucy any kindness since she had been thrown out of her home. "You're new to the streets, aren't you, sweetheart?" Grace asked quietly, sitting down next to Lucy at one of the reading tables. Lucy nodded, too embarrassed to speak. She was afraid that if she started talking, she would start crying and never stop. "I've been out here for 2 years now," Grace continued. "Lost my apartment when I couldn't pay the rent after my husband died. It's not easy, but you learn how to survive." Grace taught Lucy the basic rules of street life. She showed her which restaurant managers might give away leftover food at closing time, which doorways were safe to sleep in, and which areas to avoid because they were controlled by dangerous people. "The most important thing," Grace explained, "is to stay invisible. Don't cause trouble. Don't draw attention to yourself, and always be ready to move if someone tells you to leave." Lucy learned these lessons quickly because she had to. The streets were full of people who had their own problems and didn't want to deal with a lost child. Some people were kind and would give her a few coins or a sandwich, but others would yell at her or threaten to call the police if she didn't move along. But instead, he walked into a tense situation. His wife was waiting for him with her arms crossed and an angry expression, while Lucy sat in the corner with red, puffy eyes from crying. "We need to talk," his wife said before he even had a chance to wash his hands. "Your daughter has become a thief." Lucy's father looked confused and concerned. He had never known Lucy to take anything that didn't belong to her. She was usually so careful about following rules and being respectful. His wife quickly explained about the missing dollar bill and how she was certain Lucy had taken it. She made it sound like Lucy had been planning this theft for days and had finally acted on her criminal impulses. "Lucy," her father said gently, "did you take the money?" "No, Dad," Lucy said through her tears. "I promise I didn't. I was reading in my room the whole time. I didn't even know about the money until she started looking for it." Lucy's father wanted to believe his daughter, but he was so tired from working 16 hours that day. His wife kept insisting that Lucy was lying, and she was very convincing. She talked about how kids Lucy's age often started stealing small things, and how it would only get worse if they didn't address it immediately. "Maybe she doesn't even realize it's wrong," his wife continued. "Maybe she just saw the money sitting there and thought she could take a little bit without anyone noticing." The argument continued for another hour, with Lucy's stepmother becoming more and more angry and dramatic. She talked about how she couldn't trust Lucy anymore, how she was worried about leaving her money or jewelry around the house, and how this was just the beginning of bigger problems. Lucy's father, exhausted and overwhelmed, finally gave in to his wife's pressure. He told Lucy that she was grounded for a week and that she would have to do extra chores to make up for the missing dollar. He said he was disappointed in her, and those words hurt Lucy more than any punishment ever could. "But Dad," Lucy cried, "I really didn't do it. Why won't anyone believe me?" "The evidence is pretty clear, sweetheart," her father said sadly. "We were the only two people here and the money is gone. I need you to learn that taking things that don't belong to you is never okay." That night, Lucy lay in her small bed feeling completely hopeless. She stared at the ceiling and wished her real mother was still alive. Her mother would have known she was telling the truth. Her mother would have helped find the real explanation for the missing money. But her mother was gone, and Lucy was stuck in a house where her own family didn't believe her word. She felt like a stranger in her own home, unwanted and unloved. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of her stepmother's plan to get rid of her permanently. 3 weeks had passed since Lucy first found herself on the streets, and she had grown thinner despite Grace's help in finding food. Her clothes hung loose on her small frame, and her once bright eyes had become dull with exhaustion. The cold October nights were getting harder to survive, and Lucy's persistent cough had gotten worse. Grace worried about her constantly, knowing that winter was coming, and a sick child wouldn't survive long in these conditions. Lucy had learned the rhythm of street life. During the day, she would sit quietly in the public library, reading books and staying warm. The head librarian, Mrs. Patterson, had started to notice the small girl who appeared every morning when the doors opened and stayed until closing time. Lucy was always clean and polite, never causing any trouble. But Mrs. Patterson could see the signs of a child in crisis. In the evenings, Lucy would help Grace collect cans and bottles for recycling money. They had a regular route through the business district, checking dumpsters behind restaurants and office buildings for anything valuable. It wasn't much, but the few dollars they earned each day were enough to buy a cheap meal to share. On this particular Friday night, Lucy and Grace had finished their usual route earlier than normal. Most of the office workers had already gone home, and the business district was quiet except for the occasional car driving past. Grace was feeling sicker than usual. Her arthritis was acting up because of the cold weather, and she could barely walk. "I think I need to rest for the night." "Sweetheart," Grace told Lucy as they sat on a bench near the bus stop, "my joints are screaming at me today." Lucy looked concerned. Grace never complained about pain, so Lucy knew it must be really bad for her to admit she was hurting. "We can go back to the shelter early tonight," Lucy suggested. "You need to take care of yourself." Grace smiled weakly at Lucy's concern. Even after everything this child had been through, she was still thinking about others before herself. "You're a good girl, Lucy," Grace said. "Your mama raised you right." They walked slowly toward the downtown shelter where they usually spent nights when the weather was too cold to sleep outside. The shelter was always crowded and sometimes dangerous, but it was better than freezing on the streets. As they walked, Grace started feeling dizzy and had to stop frequently to catch her breath. "Grace, are you okay?" Lucy asked, noticing that her friend's face looked pale and sweaty. "I just need to sit down for a minute," Grace said, leaning against the brick wall of a tall office building. "Give me a second to catch my breath." Lucy helped Grace sit down in the doorway of the building. It was a fancy place with big glass windows and polished stone steps. During the day, it was full of people in expensive suits carrying briefcases and talking on phones. But at night, it was empty and quiet. Grace closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. But Lucy could see that something was seriously wrong. Grace's hands were shaking and she was having trouble staying upright even while sitting down. "I think we should call for help," Lucy said, her voice filled with worry. "You need to see a doctor." "No hospitals," Grace whispered. "Can't afford it. Just let me rest here for a few minutes." Lucy didn't know what to do. She was only 8 years old and she had never dealt with a medical emergency before. She stayed close to Grace, holding her hand and trying to keep her warm by sharing her thin jacket. About 30 minutes later, a black luxury car pulled up to the curb in front of the building. Lucy watched nervously as a man in an expensive suit got out and walked toward the main entrance. He was tall and looked important, the kind of person who probably owned buildings like this one. The man stopped when he saw Grace and Lucy huddled in the doorway. At first, he looked annoyed, probably thinking they were just homeless people who needed to be moved along. But then he noticed how young Lucy was and how sick Grace appeared to be. Instead of calling security or walking past them, the man approached slowly. He had gray hair and kind eyes, and something about the way he looked at Lucy reminded her of her grandfather, who had died when she was very young. "Excuse me," the man said gently, crouching down to their level. "Is everything all right here?" Lucy looked up at him with frightened eyes. She had learned to be suspicious of strangers, especially well-dressed ones who might call the police or social services. But this man's voice was warm and concerned, not angry or threatening. "My friend is sick," Lucy said quietly. "She needs help, but she won't let me call anyone." The man looked more closely at Grace, who was barely conscious at this point. He could see that this was a serious medical situation that needed immediate attention. "I'm going to call an ambulance," he said, pulling out his phone. "Your friend needs medical care right away." "She doesn't have insurance," Lucy said quickly. "She can't pay for a hospital." The man paused and looked at Lucy with surprise. It was unusual for such a young child to understand things like medical insurance and hospital bills. Most kids her age wouldn't even think about such adult concerns. "Don't worry about that right now," he said kindly. "Let's just focus on getting her the help she needs." While they waited for the ambulance, the man sat down on the steps next to Lucy. He introduced himself as Mr. Wellington, and he explained that he owned the building they were sitting in front of. Lucy expected him to ask them to leave, but instead he seemed genuinely concerned about their welfare. "How long have you and your friend been living on the streets?" he asked. Lucy hesitated, not sure how much she should tell this stranger. But there was something about Mr. Wellington that made her feel safe, and Grace always said that you had to trust your instincts about people. "Grace has been out here for 2 years, Lucy said. "I've been here for 3 weeks, Mr. Wellington looked shocked. 3 weeks? How old are you, sweetheart? 8, Lucy answered honestly. The man's face went pale. He had a daughter once, and the thought of a child Lucy's age surviving alone on the streets made his heart ache. His daughter would have been about Lucy's age now if she hadn't died in that terrible car accident 5 years ago. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she had learned not to cry easily anymore. Crying didn't solve problems or find food or keep you warm at night. "My mom died when I was 5, she said. "My dad lives with my stepmother, but she threw me out because she thought I stole $1 from her. I didn't take it, but nobody believed me." Mr. Wellington felt anger rising in his chest. What kind of adult would throw a child out on the streets over $1? Even if Lucy had taken the money, which he seriously doubted, no child deserved to be abandoned like this. The ambulance arrived, and the paramedics quickly assessed Grace's condition. She was dehydrated and suffering from pneumonia, complications that could be deadly for someone her age living in harsh conditions. They loaded her onto a stretcher and prepared to take her to the hospital. "I want to go with her," Lucy said, trying to climb into the ambulance. "She's all I have. Please don't leave me here alone." The paramedics explained that only family members could ride in the ambulance, and they didn't have room for anyone else. Lucy watched helplessly as the ambulance drove away with the only person who had shown her kindness in weeks. Mr. Wellington saw the devastation on Lucy's face and made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. He couldn't just walk away and leave this child alone on the streets, especially not after what she had just been through. "Come with me," he said. reaching out his hand to Lucy. "Let's get you something to eat, and then we'll go check on your friend at the hospital." Lucy looked at his outstretched hand suspiciously. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Mr. Wellington thought about his answer carefully. The truth was, he saw something in Lucy that reminded him of his own daughter, not just her age, but her intelligence, her loyalty to Grace, and the way she tried to be brave even when she was scared. "Because everyone deserves kindness," he said simply. "And because you've been through enough hardship for someone 10 times your age." Lucy stared at him for a long moment, trying to decide if she could trust this stranger. Grace had taught her to be careful, but she had also taught her to recognize genuine kindness when she saw it. Finally, Lucy reached out and took Mr. Wellington's hand. It was warm and strong, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe things could get better. Mr. Wellington led Lucy to his car, a luxury vehicle that was probably worth more than most people made in a year. Lucy had never been in such an expensive car before, and she was afraid to touch anything with her dirty hands. "Don't worry about the car," Mr. Wellington said, noticing her hesitation. "It's just metal and leather. You're much more important than any material possession." As they drove toward the hospital, Mr. Wellington listened to Lucy tell him more about her story. She explained about her stepmother's accusations, about being thrown out of her home, and about how Grace had become her protector and teacher in the harsh world of the streets. With each detail Lucy shared, Mr. Wellington became more amazed by this child's resilience and more angry at the adults who had failed her. By the time they reached the hospital, he had already decided that he couldn't just help Lucy for one night and then send her back to the streets. This little girl deserved so much more than the hand life had dealt her, and Mr. Wellington found himself wanting to be the person who could give her a real chance at happiness and success. Little did Lucy know that her life was about to change in ways she had never even dared to dream about. The nights were the hardest part. Even with Grace's help in finding safe places to sleep, Lucy was always cold, always scared, and always lonely. She would lie awake thinking about her warm bed at home, wondering if her father had even noticed she was gone. After about a week on the streets, Lucy overheard 2 police officers talking about looking for a missing child. For a moment, her heart jumped with hope. Maybe her father was searching for her. But then she heard them describe a different child, and she realized that her own disappearance hadn't even been reported. The truth was devastating but clear. Her stepmother had convinced her father that Lucy had run away on her own. He probably thought she was just acting out because she was angry about being accused of stealing. He had no idea that she had been forced out into the cold night with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart. As the days turned into weeks, Lucy learned to survive in ways that no 8-year-old should ever have to learn. She became an expert at finding food, staying warm, and avoiding danger. But most importantly, she learned that even in the darkest situations, there were still good people in the world who would help if they could. Grace became like a grandmother to Lucy, sharing what little she had and protecting her from the worst dangers of street life. Other homeless people in their area also looked out for Lucy, understanding that a child alone was everyone's responsibility to protect. But despite the kindness of these strangers, Lucy never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, she would find her way back to a real home where she was wanted and loved. She just had no idea that her rescue would come from the most unexpected source imaginable. 7 years had passed since that cold October night when Lucy had been thrown out onto the streets with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart. Now 15 years old, she stood at the podium in her high school auditorium, wearing a cap and gown and looking out at a crowd of proud faces. She had just been named valedictorian of her graduating class, something that would have been impossible to imagine during those dark weeks when she was sleeping in doorways and searching for food in dumpsters. In the front row sat Mr. Wellington, his eyes bright with tears of pride. Next to him was Grace, now working as a social worker and looking healthier and happier than she had in years. Even Lucy's biological father was there, having traveled from across the state where he now lived with his new wife, a kind woman who had helped him understand the terrible mistake he had made years ago. Lucy's stepmother was nowhere to be seen, having disappeared from their lives completely after the truth about that missing dollar bill finally came to light. It had been found months later, fallen behind a dresser drawer, exactly where it had probably slipped the night Lucy was accused of stealing it. But by then, everyone understood that the missing money had never really been the point. The stepmother had simply been looking for an excuse to get rid of a child she had never wanted. As Lucy began her valedictorian speech, her voice was clear and confident. She no longer resembled the scared, hungry little girl who had once huddled in building doorways, hoping for someone to show her kindness. 7 years ago, I learned that life can change in an instant, Lucy began, her words carrying across the auditorium. One day you can be safe and warm in your bed, and the next day you can be sleeping on the cold ground with nowhere to go and no one who cares about you. The audience listened intently as Lucy told her story, though most of them already knew the basic details. Her journey from homeless child to academic star had become well known in their community, inspiring other families to reach out and help children in crisis. But I also learned something else during that difficult time, Lucy continued. I learned that even in the darkest moments, there are people who will choose kindness over indifference. There are people who will see a problem and decide to be part of the solution instead of just walking past it. Lucy's eyes found Mr. Wellington in the crowd, and she smiled at the man who had saved her life in every way that mattered. He had given her more than just a home and an education. He had given her back her belief that she was worthy of love and success. My adopted father once told me that our worst experiences can sometimes lead to our greatest blessings, Lucy said. At the time, I thought he was just trying to make me feel better about what had happened to me. But now I understand that he was right. The pain I experienced taught me things that I never could have learned any other way. After the graduation ceremony, there was a reception in the school cafeteria. Lucy moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and hugs from teachers, classmates, and community members who had watched her transformation over the years. But the moment she treasured most was when Grace pulled her aside for a private conversation. I am so proud of who you've become, Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. That scared little girl I met under the bridge has grown into someone who's going to change the world. I had good teachers, Lucy replied, squeezing Grace's hand. You taught me how to survive, and Mr. Wellington taught me how to thrive. Now I want to teach other kids that they can do both. Lucy's plans for the future were ambitious but well thought out. She had been accepted to several prestigious universities with full scholarships, and she planned to study social work and business administration. Her goal was to create a foundation that would help homeless children get back into school and find stable homes. But her vision went beyond just providing basic services. Lucy wanted to create a program that would address the root causes of why children end up on the streets in the first place. She had spent years researching the topic, interviewing other people who had experienced homelessness, and working with social workers to understand the gaps in the current system. Most programs focus on helping kids after they're already in crisis. Lucy explained to a reporter who was writing a story about her graduation. But I want to create something that prevents kids from ending up homeless in the first place. Early intervention, family counseling, emergency financial assistance, anything that can keep families together when they're struggling. Over the summer before starting college, Lucy worked full-time at the community center where Grace was employed. She helped organize a summer camp for children from low-income families, teaching them basic life skills and helping them with their homework. Many of these kids reminded Lucy of herself at that age, bright and eager to learn, but lacking the support and resources they needed to succeed. One of her favorite campers was a 7-year-old boy named Tommy, whose mother worked 2 jobs to support them both. Tommy was struggling in school and acting out at home, classic signs of a child under stress. Lucy took special interest in him, helping him with his reading and listening to his worries about his family's financial problems. My mom cries sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping, Tommy confided to Lucy one afternoon. I think it's because we don't have enough money for food and rent. Lucy felt her heart ache for this little boy who was carrying worries no child should have to bear. She spoke to Grace about Tommy's situation. and together they connected his mother with resources that could help: a food bank, assistance with utility bills, and a program that provided after-school care so she could work more hours without worrying about Tommy's safety. "This is exactly why your foundation is so needed," Grace told Lucy after they had helped Tommy's family. "You understand these problems from the inside, and you know how to create solutions that actually work." As Lucy's first semester of college approached, Mr. Wellington threw a going-away party for her at their house. The same rooms that had once felt empty and sad were now filled with laughter and celebration. Lucy's classmates, teachers, and friends from the community center all came to wish her well. During the party, Lucy's father approached her nervously. They had been rebuilding their relationship slowly over the past few years, but he still carried tremendous guilt about what had happened to her. "I know I can never undo the mistakes I made," he said quietly. "But I want you to know how proud I am of the person you've become. You're stronger and kinder than I ever was, and you're going to help so many people." Lucy hugged her father, feeling the forgiveness she had worked so hard to achieve through counseling and time. "We all make mistakes, Dad," she said. "What matters is that we learn from them and try to do better." Later that evening, after all the guests had gone home, Lucy and Mr. Wellington sat together on the back porch, looking up at the stars. It had become their tradition over the years, these quiet moments together when they could talk about anything or nothing at all. "Are you nervous about starting college?" Mr. Wellington asked. "A little," Lucy admitted, "but mostly I'm excited. I feel like everything I've been through has been preparing me for this next chapter." Mr. Wellington nodded thoughtfully. "You know, when I first found you in that doorway, I thought I was rescuing you. But the truth is, you rescued me too. This house was just a building before you came into my life. You made it a home again." Lucy felt tears forming in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "You saved my life," she said simply. "You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." "And now you're going to save other lives," Mr. Wellington replied. "The foundation you're planning will help thousands of children. You're going to break the cycle of homelessness and hopelessness for so many families." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Lucy thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about that terrified 8-year-old who had been accused of stealing $1 she never took, and how that false accusation had led to the biggest transformation of her life. The missing dollar bill now sat framed on Lucy's desk upstairs, not as a reminder of the injustice she had faced, but as a symbol of how something small and seemingly insignificant could change everything. Mr. Wellington had retrieved it from her father when they were cleaning out his old apartment, and Lucy had decided to keep it as a reminder of how far she had come. "I'm going to call the foundation Second Chances," Lucy announced suddenly, "because everyone deserves a second chance at happiness, no matter what mistakes they've made or what terrible things have happened to them." Mr. Wellington smiled in the darkness. "I think that's perfect," he said. Amy would have loved that name. She always believed in giving people second chances, too. As Lucy prepared to leave for college the next month, she carried with her not just dreams of academic success, but a clear vision of how she would use her education to help others. She had learned that one person's kindness could change everything, and now she was ready to be that person for children who needed it most. The scared little girl who had once slept in doorways and searched for food in dumpsters was gone, replaced by a confident young woman who understood that her painful past had given her the tools to create a better future for others. The hospital waiting room was nothing like Lucy had ever experienced before. The bright fluorescent lights made everything look clean and sterile, so different from the dark alleys and dirty doorways she had called home for the past 3 weeks. She sat in one of the plastic chairs, her small legs barely reaching the floor, still clutching her worn backpack like a lifeline. Mr. Wellington had spoken to the nurses about Grace's condition and arranged for all her medical bills to be covered. Lucy watched in amazement as he simply handed over a credit card and signed some papers, making the financial worry disappear like magic. She had never seen anyone solve problems with money so easily before. "Grace is going to be okay," Mr. Wellington told Lucy as he sat down beside her. The doctors say she has pneumonia, but they caught it early enough to treat it. She'll need to stay here for about a week, maybe longer. Lucy felt relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a new worry. What am I supposed to do for a week? She asked quietly. Grace taught me everything I know about living on the streets. I don't know how to survive without her. Mr. Wellington looked at this brave little girl and felt his heart breaking. She was worried about practical survival when she should have been thinking about toys and games and what to watch on television. No child should have to carry such heavy responsibilities. You don't have to go back to the streets, he said gently. I have a big house with plenty of room. You could stay there while Grace gets better. Lucy looked at him suspiciously. Grace had warned her about strangers who offered things that seemed too good to be true. Why would you do that for someone you just met? She asked. Mr. Wellington thought carefully about how to answer. He didn't want to scare Lucy away, but he also wanted to be honest with her. I had a daughter once, he said slowly. She would have been about your age now, but she died in a car accident 5 years ago. Since then, my house has been very quiet and very empty. Maybe we could help each other. Lucy studied his face, looking for signs that he might be lying or that he had bad intentions. But all she saw was sadness and genuine kindness. Still, she had learned to be careful. I don't know, she said. Grace always told me to be careful about trusting people too quickly. Grace sounds like a very smart woman, Mr. Wellington agreed. And she's right to teach you to be careful. How about this? Why don't we go get you something to eat? And you can ask me any questions you want. If you don't feel comfortable staying at my house, I'll help you find somewhere safe to stay until Grace gets out of the hospital. Lucy's stomach growled loudly at the mention of food. She hadn't eaten anything since sharing a small bag of chips with Grace earlier that day. Mr. Wellington heard the sound and smiled kindly. When was the last time you had a real meal? He asked. Lucy had to think about it. I guess it was about 4 days ago. A lady at one of the restaurants gave us some leftover soup and bread. Mr. Wellington felt anger rising in his chest again, but he kept his voice calm and gentle. No child should go 4 days without a proper meal, especially not in a city where there was plenty of food available. They left the hospital and went to a nearby diner that was still open despite the late hour. Lucy felt self-conscious about her dirty clothes and tangled hair, but Mr. Wellington didn't seem to care about any of that. He ordered her a big plate of pancakes, eggs, bacon, and orange juice, more food than she had seen in weeks. Eat as much as you want, he told her. And don't worry about finishing everything. We can always take leftovers with us. As Lucy ate, Mr. Wellington told her more about himself. He explained that he owned several businesses and buildings around the city, but that work had become his only focus after his daughter died. He lived alone in a big house that used to be filled with laughter and family dinners, but now felt more like a museum than a home. What was your daughter's name? Lucy asked between bites of pancakes. Amy, Mr. Wellington said with a sad smile. She loved reading just like you do. She always had a book in her hands, and she would ask me to read to her every night before bed. Lucy could hear the love and pain in his voice when he talked about Amy. She understood that kind of pain because she still missed her own mother every single day. I'm sorry she died, Lucy said simply. I know how much it hurts to lose someone you love. Mr. Wellington was surprised by the maturity and compassion in Lucy's response. Most adults didn't know how to talk about loss with such understanding and grace. After dinner, Mr. Wellington drove Lucy to his house so she could see where he was offering to let her stay. The house was enormous, bigger than the entire apartment building where Lucy used to live with her father and stepmother. It had a circular driveway, perfectly maintained gardens, and windows that gleamed like jewels in the darkness. This is where you live? Lucy asked in amazement as they pulled up to the front door. It's too big for just one person, Mr. Wellington admitted. But Amy loved having space to run around, so we bought the biggest house we could find. Inside, the house was just as impressive as the outside. There were high ceilings, expensive furniture, and artwork on the walls. Everything was clean and organized, but it felt cold and empty. Lucy could imagine how different it must have been when Amy was alive, filled with the sounds of a happy family. Mr. Wellington showed Lucy to a guest bedroom that was bigger than the entire apartment she used to share with her father and stepmother. The bed was enormous and covered with soft pillows and blankets. There was a desk by the window, a bookshelf filled with books, and even a television. "This would be your room," he explained. "You'd have your own bathroom and you could decorate it however you want." Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, sinking into the soft mattress. It had been so long since she had slept on anything comfortable that she had almost forgotten what it felt like. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked again. "Most people just walk past homeless kids like they don't even see them." Mr. Wellington sat down in the chair by the desk, giving Lucy space but staying close enough to talk comfortably. "Because everyone deserves a chance," he said. "And because I can see that you're special, Lucy. You're smart, you're brave, and you care about other people even when you're going through hard times yourself. Those are rare qualities, especially in someone so young." Lucy felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She had learned not to let herself hope for good things because disappointment hurt too much when those hopes were crushed. "What if my dad comes looking for me?" she asked. "What if he realizes his wife lied about me stealing that money?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Mr. Wellington said. "But right now, you need a safe place to sleep and regular meals and someone who believes in you. I can provide all of those things." Lucy was quiet for a long moment, thinking about everything that had happened to her over the past few weeks. She thought about sleeping in doorways and dumpsters, about going days without food, about being so cold that she couldn't stop shivering. Then she looked around this beautiful, warm room and imagined what it would be like to feel safe again. "Can I think about it tonight?" she asked. "I want to make the right decision." "Of course," Mr. Wellington said. "Take all the time you need. In the meantime, why don't you take a hot shower and get some rest? Tomorrow we can visit Grace and see how she's feeling." Lucy agreed, and Mr. Wellington showed her how to use the shower in her bathroom. The hot water felt like a miracle against her skin, washing away weeks of dirt and fear. When she got out, she found that Mr. Wellington had left clean pajamas and a soft robe for her to wear. That night, as Lucy lay in the comfortable bed with clean sheets and warm blankets, she stared at the ceiling and thought about her options. She could go back to the streets and wait for Grace to get out of the hospital, but winter was coming, and she wasn't sure she would survive the cold. Or she could trust this kind stranger who seemed to genuinely care about her welfare. Lucy thought about her mother, who had always taught her to look for the good in people while being smart about protecting herself. She thought about Grace, who had shown her that there were still good people in the world who would help others without expecting anything in return. As she drifted off to sleep in the first real bed she had slept in for weeks, Lucy made her decision. Tomorrow, she would tell Mr. Wellington that she wanted to stay, at least until Grace was better. And maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something better than anything she had dared to hope for. For the first time since being thrown out of her home, Lucy fell asleep feeling safe and wanted. She didn't know it yet, but this decision would change the entire course of her life in ways that would benefit not just her, but countless other children who would someday find themselves in similar situations. One of the biggest changes in Lucy's life was having her own space and belongings. Mr. Wellington let her redecorate the guest bedroom however she wanted, and they spent several weekends picking out furniture, bedding, and decorations together. Lucy chose bright colors and filled the room with books, art supplies, and a few stuffed animals that reminded her of the toy rabbit she had lost when she was thrown out of her house. But perhaps the most important change was having someone who believed in her and supported her dreams. Mr. Wellington attended every school event, helped with homework when she asked, and listened patiently when she wanted to talk about her day or her worries. "I never had anyone show interest in my schoolwork before," Lucy told him one evening as they worked on a science project together. "My dad was always too tired from work, and my stepmother just saw it as another expense." "Education is never an expense," Mr. Wellington replied. "It's an investment in your future. And besides, I enjoy learning about the things you're studying. You teach me something new every day." Grace was released from the hospital after 2 weeks and was thrilled to see how much Lucy had flourished in such a short time. Mr. Wellington had helped Grace find a small apartment and a part-time job at a community center where she could use her experience to help other people who were struggling with homelessness. "You saved my life in more ways than one," Grace told Mr. Wellington when they met for dinner one evening. "Not just by paying for the hospital, but by giving Lucy the chance she deserves. She's like a different child, confident, hopeful, excited about the future." Lucy was indeed becoming more confident every day. She joined the school's math club and made friends with other students who shared her interests. She started volunteering at the community center where Grace worked, helping to organize donations and reading to younger children who came there with their families. As the months passed, Lucy began to understand that her difficult experiences had taught her things that many people her age never learned. She understood the value of kindness, the importance of not judging others, and the strength that comes from surviving hardship. These lessons, combined with the opportunities Mr. Wellington was providing, were shaping her into someone special. "I want to help other kids like me someday," Lucy told Mr. Wellington one evening as they sat in the living room reading together. "Kids who get blamed for things they didn't do or who end up on the streets with nowhere to go." Mr. Wellington looked up from his book and smiled at her. "I think that's a wonderful goal," he said. "And I think you're exactly the right person to make a real difference in the world." Lucy smiled back at him, feeling grateful for this second chance at childhood and excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. She was no longer the scared, hungry child who had been thrown out into the cold night. She was becoming someone strong, capable, and determined to use her experiences to help others find hope in their darkest moments.